Good evening, everyone. My name is Les Smith. I'm with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's webinar concerning the Wolverine World Wide Tannery Interceptor Response Activity Plan. Before we reach the opening of our presentations this evening, I would like to welcome to the virtual podium Abby Hendershot. Abby is the Executive Director for IMPART. Abby, would you please come and welcome our guests?
Yes, thank you, Les. I appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. My name is Abby Hendershot. I am the Executive Director of the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team, and I thank you for coming tonight. We're going to talk about the Wolverine World Wide Tannery Interceptor Response Activity Plan. And as you probably know, the team here includes our very own Karen Voris, who is Project Manager Extraordinaire. She has been leading the charge for almost all of the Wolverine actions. Dave Banlow is the acting Grand Rapids District Supervisor now for RRD. And you just met Les Smith, who is going to moderate our webinar tonight. So as with all these, there's plenty of time to ask questions. Go ahead and ask your questions in the Q&A box down below, but we're going to go through the presentation of the draft response activity plan that Karen has put together for you, the different ways that we are going to, you can submit official comments for this response activity plan, because this response activity plan is open to public comments, and then how to do that, who to contact with further questions, how to submit your questions. And then we'll have, like I said, plenty of time for the question and answer session. So I think, do we have one more slide on how to do all that, Les? There we go.
Yeah. Thanks, Abby. Just as a reminder to folks who may have been on webinars with us before, and just to update those that are new to us, the webinar is being recorded for future viewing. So I'll show you on the next slide how you can communicate with us. Also want to let you know that your lines are muted. So in the next slides here, I will share with you how you can communicate with us, and that will be through several ways here. You can type a question in the Q&A box located in the Zoom control panel at the bottom of the screen. During the question and answer portion of tonight's conversation, you can raise your hand electronically, and that you can just, there's a hand at the bottom of the screen, you can select that. And right now for our panelists, we don't have anyone on the phone. So if we do, I will update the instructions for callers on the phone. So with that, Karen, if you are ready to share your screen, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks, Les.
You're welcome.
Okay, it should be sharing right now, hopefully.
Yes.
Great. Well, good evening, everyone. Another virtual meeting. I know I can see the attendees list. I think I know almost everybody on there now. It's good that you could join us tonight. I'm going to turn on my laser pointer. So I think you all know why you're here. We're going to talk about Wolverine's draft Tannery Interceptor System Response Activity Plan. Again, I think most of you know me fairly well, but I am Karen Voris. I am the project manager here in the Remediation Redevelopment Division in Grand Rapids, overseeing Wolverine's work in the area under the consent decree. And so we do have an active public comment period that is open right now. We are accepting written comments through May 22nd. We'll have more information on that at the end of the presentation, where you can send your comments to. And tonight, really, the main focus of the meeting, we'll go over the plan, the draft plan together that Wolverine submitted. And I just hope that it will help enable you to better understand the contents of the plan, the requirements of the consent decree, so you can provide your written comments to EGLE for our consideration. You know, obviously we're not here for EGLE to tell you what we think or our interpretations or our technical review. We're really here just to show you the plan as it was submitted, give you the layout of the land there, and answer any questions that we can help answer tonight, and help facilitate you providing your public comments to us. So the agenda will start out with just a quick brief overview of the consent decree, which is kind of the framework that we're working under. We'll talk about the tannery property location, a little bit of history, why we see PFAS there. We'll go over the specific requirements that apply to the tannery property itself. And then we'll go over the contents, the main kind of takeaways and bullets from the draft interceptor system response activity plan. We'll also go over the next steps, how this review is going to go over more details of, again, of this public comment period, and then we'll open it up to any questions you have. So I'm probably sounding like a broken record for a lot of you now, but for though there could be some new people, we do get a few of those every viewing, and folks who watch the viewing after, or the recording after it's been recorded. But you know, back in 2018, the state of Michigan filed a lawsuit. A lawsuit was brought against Wolverine World Wide in federal court regarding the contamination of residential drinking water wells and the environment in northern Kent County. And Plainfield and Algoma townships were intervening plaintiffs on that lawsuit. And in February 2020, a settlement agreement was approved and basically became effective with the approval from the judge on February 19th, 2020. And so this consent decree document does serve, you know, as what the main tenets, the main objectives, the main requirements that Wolverine must meet. And that's required by the state and the townships as well, in what's called the North Kent study area. So again, it applies to this area shown on this map on the screen here. It's about, you know, 20-25 square miles. Tonight, we're going to be focusing on the tannery property, which is this little red outline just east of the Rogue River here in downtown Rockford. This is the former tannery site where this work plan is associated with. But, you know, the consent decree does cover this entire area from 12 Mile down to the Grand River, west to Pine Island, as far east as downtown Rockford. It's also important to note that this, you know, Wolverine is required to do this work. We oversee it, we review and approve their work plans, we get public comment on the work plans. That's very important to us, but it is done under EGLE oversight. Last couple meetings, there was some confusion. People thought we were spending state funds on this. That is not the case. This is an agreement where the liable party has to spend their funds, which is why they're proposing the work. This is their work plans that we are reviewing and commenting on. And so that's why it's done under EGLE oversight. I just wanted to clarify that in the get-go here. And this document is posted online if you want to read the document in its entirety, and that's at www.michigan.gov/Belmont. You can see the entire consent decree document. So specifically tonight, we're going to focus on some source control at the tannery site. This is discussed in section 7.7 of this consent decree document. This is where the Tannery Interceptor system plan falls in. But again, there's obviously a lot of moving parts to the overall investigation that are happening right now, simultaneously as the review of this plan, including continued municipal water expansion, filter operation and maintenance in a lot of areas, continued residential drinking water well resampling. About just over a month ago, we had a public meeting for the feasibility study for the House Street disposal site. So we're still reviewing that document. So that work is ongoing. There's a bunch of groundwater investigations. Drill rigs are out right now installing those monitoring wells from those response activities we reviewed last year, if you remember, in the summer and fall. So that work is ongoing, as well as groundwater surface water interface investigations at the Rogue River in key areas where there have been concerns of contamination venting into the Rogue River. So that is also ongoing as well. But tonight, again, we're focused specifically on the Tannery and the Interceptor system plan. So here's a little zoom in on the Tannery property. This is, kind of the official outline of it in this blue. It does, for whatever reason, kind of go into the river a little bit, but that's just kind of how the parcel maps are. The historic address associated with this is 123 North Main Street, downtown Rockford. I want to point out Rum Creek. There's a creek here that flows through, kind of bisects the Tannery site in half. This is Rum Creek, so we'll be referring to that quite a bit. Here on the west is the Rogue River. Main Street is right here, borders the site just to the east. You can see on the property what remains of the former tannery is just the shoe depot building, a retail store, and some concrete left over on Rum Creek and some parking areas. It's approximately 14.5 acres. And, the site was developed with the tannery back, as far as the early 1900s. And that tannery operated until 2009, and at which point it was decommissioned and demolished in 2010 and 2011. So the only thing that remains from those demolition activities, at least above ground here, you can see is the shoe depot, which is, just the retail store it's called. And the reason why we have PFAS issues here, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS for short, is that in the 1950s, Wolverine began using Scotchgard, as a water and stain repellent for their Hush Puppies brand shoe line. And PFAS are the active ingredients in Scotchgard that is applied to shoes to make them waterproof, the leather shoes. And so that's how, we have PFAS come to be known and located at this property from that historical use. So hopefully this will help with folks who just like to be visual and be able to reference in their mind when we're talking about certain features of the site. This is where we're at. So this figure is included in the response activity plan. I believe it's included more within the text. It's embedded in the text of the document, but it's also a figure that was provided in a previous report that was done for US EPA, dated, I want to say in early 2019, but it's a summary of the work that was done, a lot of the sampling during 2018. Wolverine did a bunch of work for US EPA, and as part of that, the state had them sample for PFAS. So we were able to get data on PFAS at the site, specifically in groundwater. This particular figure shows a particular PFAS compound, right? There's thousands of these in the family of the PFAS family, but this is specifically showing PFOS in particular, perfluorosulfonic acid, but I'm just going to call it PFOS. And basically you can see we do have PFOS and basically the other PFAS compounds that we find. They're across the site in the groundwater. And so the issue we have is that we have the Rogue River adjoining, and there is interaction between the groundwater at the property and the surface water body. And based on these high concentrations that we have, we're talking over 300,000 parts per trillion of specifically PFOS. Our groundwater standards and our cleanup standards for PFOS in surface water is 12 parts per trillion PFOS. So obviously we have very high concentrations and a very low surface water standard, and they're right next to each other. And so we have a problem where we have groundwater that exceeds that surface water, that water quality standard, getting into the Rogue River. And we all know, we've talked about a lot of meetings and different community meetings, the Rogue River has, high levels of PFAS in the foam, in the surface water, but also the fish have been impacted. So really the goal of this remedial action, this interceptor system, is to prevent the water. PFOS is more of the driver because of the the lower surface water quality standard, but really to collect all of the PFAS impacted groundwater, preventing it from venting into the Rogue River. And so that's kind of the problem and what is trying to be addressed with this plan. I wanted to include this slide just as a visual representation. I'll kind of go over it a little bit so you can get an idea of what's going on here. There's a lot of colors, and it is a little bit small. Hopefully you can at least make it out, but it is sheet number or figure number 2 here in the report. So this is the cross section kind of from north to south following this red outline. This is the trace of where this, you know, like if you took a knife and cut it in half, where we're following on the surface. So, you know, from north to south here, here's the surface here. But basically what this, I just wanted to show this to show that the Tannery site geology is complex. The soils, the subsurface that's there, it's very heterogeneous, just meaning there's a lot of different types of lithologies, just based on its location and the regional geology, as well as the urban activities that were completed at the property. But you know, we have clay layers shown in kind of this darker blue. You can see little blips of the clay showing up in different places. We have gray, which represents just silt. We also have sand with gravel as this orange color that you'll see in some areas, as well as here's just some gravel, which is, you know, highly porous, highly permeable, where groundwater does like to travel through. And the sand is kind of this peachy color here. So basically just visually, even if you're not a hydrogeologist or a geologist, you can see visually that yes, we have a lot going on here. It's not uniform, right? It's not perfect little pancake layers or layer cake stratigraphy. We do have a complex environment, which does make it more difficult when you're modeling groundwater hydrogeology models and trying to design a system to do this. So this is, you know, they have included quite a few of these cross sections, so you can take a look at those. But that's really what these figures are trying to depict, is the different types of soils and that are across the site, and it varies depending on where you're at. Groundwater does discharge to the Rogue River right here. It is considered a ganging stream, meaning it is taking in groundwater. So that's kind of what we wanted to just point out on this particular slide before we get into the document. So this is just a clip and paste from the consent decree, section 7.7, that specifically goes over response activities at the Tannery property. And so the effective date, meaning when this consent decree became effective, again, February 19, 2020. So February 19, 2021, this response activity plan was submitted to us. We posted it on our Tannery website. I think it was February, that next week, February 23rd, 24th. We got it posted up there. So it has been posted since the end of February. But we obviously were having a different public meeting prior to this and public comment. So we wanted to have it up there, you know, for a longer amount of time and give folks the opportunity to have time to review this highly technical document. So this was submitted to us February 19th, and basically it had to include this design. There was an originally designed interceptor system that was being worked on by Wolverine prior to 2020, prior to when we came to this agreement in the consent decree. So this document had to take the prior system that had some of the extraction wells installed, some of the design started, and meld that in with an expansion or an update, basically, that would be comprehensive across the whole site. And so that's what it was required. It has to be appropriately sized to address and control PFAS compounds contamination in groundwater at the Tannery before it enters the Rogue River. And this plan also needs to contain a schedule for any modifications or expansions, which we'll go over, and then also an appropriate groundwater monitoring plan to demonstrate the effectiveness of the interceptor system. So that's what the main requirements are per the consent decree. So here's kind of the table of contents of the draft Tannery Interceptor system plan. And, you know, it's just kind of a basic format. You know, we have the introduction, kind of a summary of a conceptual site model in section 2. What we're going to do is I'm going to try to do a kind of groundwater modeling 101 and just kind of briefly summarize in a less technical way sections 3 through section 9 of what's going on specifically with the groundwater modeling portion of this plan. If you really want to get into the details of the model, you know, obviously we have groundwater engineers, modelers, whole team of people looking at this model. You know, we would be more than happy to go into those details. But for this public meeting, I just wanted to make sure anyone, even without a fancy geology degree or engineering degree or any knowledge of groundwater modeling, hopefully can walk away with knowing, okay, this makes more sense. This is what they're doing here. And if you still have questions after the meeting, feel free to give me a call. My email and phone number will be at the end of this. Then we'll talk a little bit about the proposed schedule that has been given, the discussion of the monitoring plan that Wolverine has proposed, and then section 12 was just their references that they provide. There's some other reports they refer to and other technical documents. And there are, you know, you'll see there is a groundwater elevation data table that is attached as well, and sheet numbers, which basically are just figures, but they can also be called sheets. You'll see attached, again, including those cross sections, that one of which I showed at the beginning. The actual groundwater extraction well system laid out, which is sheet number 6. We'll go over that. Sheet number 7 is the proposed monitoring wells. We'll go over that. And then there's quite a few appendices, which is kind of the backup material for the modeling, the groundwater model that was done. So it has the pumping tests, it has model calibration, statistical model analyses, and then it also has the schedule and a previous tech memo summary of kind of the initial design. So you can kind of see how that's changed and modified since that was submitted a little over a year ago. Okay, so let's just do a quick overview of the groundwater modeling. So basically, starting out in section 3, Wolverine, back in, you know, before the consent decree even and throughout the last couple of years, they did some groundwater pumping tests on 3 extraction groundwater monitoring wells that are located on the Tannery site. Those were wells that they installed specifically for this pumping test, where they would put these pumps basically down the wells and pump out water from those recovery wells, and then measure how the water levels were fluctuating based on that pumping. Okay. So that's kind of basically what section 3 is talking about. Then it wasn't just, you know, them putting in the pumps, they had to measure how the water levels within the wells were changing when they were doing the pumping. So they put in this instrumentation within the wells called pressure transducers. Those were put in the recovery wells themselves, those 3, and then also nearby groundwater monitoring wells to measure the water level changes before, during, and after the pumping. Very typical pump test type of study. Again, that's specific to section 3. And the reason why they needed to do this was that based on the analysis of these pumping tests, they were able to calculate specific properties of the aquifer, or FERS, because there's, you know, it's not all just one, specific properties of the aquifers that are needed to be inputted into the groundwater model. So you have to have inputs to feed into the computer system, the software, otherwise you're not going to be able to model it, right? So they were able to create these, and it goes through this in the text, how they're, you know, calculating hydraulic conductivity and other various properties of aquifers that are needed in order to make these models. Okay, so again, that's pretty much a big part of section 3, what they lay out. They're able to calculate water drawdowns from the levels. There's a bunch of figures in the report that kind of show these trend lines of the pumping tests. That's what that's showing. How is the water behaving when you're pumping it? They also compare that what was observed in real life versus what their computer model is showing. So making sure that they have their model calibrated to as closely replicate real life what's going on in the subsurface to their model, because you want those to be as close as possible to know you have a reliable prediction of how this system is going to work. So then they use specifically, there's a lot of different groundwater modeling software out there. They specifically used USGS ModFlow, United States Geological Survey, USGS ModFlow it's called. It's basically a 3-dimensional numerical modeling software that performs this groundwater flow simulations, as well as USGS ModPath, which you'll see a figure in the text that kind of shows particle tracking. And that's just basically trying to say, hey, if I put a particle on the site at this location and we turned on the pumping system, how is that going to move? How is that going to be captured by this treatment system? So they were basically just trying to, through the modeling trials, through the calculated groundwater contours, they're trying to model, you know, at what type of pumping rate are we going to need to pump at to capture the groundwater before it goes in the Rogue River and not draw in water from the Rogue River at the same time. So they use kind of the real world measurements that they got from the pumping tests and put it in the models to try to calculate this to the best of the model's ability. You'll also see in section 6 and 7, again, this is a regional model, so kind of a larger scale model that you start out making, and then you kind of focus in on the local groundwater or more of the site specific model calibrations, again, putting different inputs in. And so you'll see in the text how, you know, when they did this modeling, they came up with, you know, total pumping rates from the wells that they're installing was approximately 19 gallons per minute or 1 gallon per minute from each extraction well. And we kind of touch on that a little bit later too. Section 7 though, again, this is local model calibration based on field observations. But then section 9 is a little bit more kind of telling and important because this talks about the aquifer heterogeneity or just the unsimilarities between the soil types at the property. Models usually assume a lot of uniformity across sites and aquifers, so you have to be able to account for, in some way, the site-specific changes that happen, even on a small scale, between the clays and the sands and the silts and all the different grain sizes that affect how the groundwater is going to flow and move, right? And so that's what's done specifically in section 9, is to evaluate the potential effect of this aquifer heterogeneity on the capture zone evaluation. So basically within the section, Wolverine, you know, they do some geostatistical modeling, that's in there. So you'll see kind of 8 different models referenced, and that's what that is. Again, it's just trying to account for these very complex different lithologies that are across the site and model different outcomes and try to figure out the best outcome for the site. Based on all of their modeling and whatnot, they do state that, you know, when they're in the field and they're installing these wells, if groundwater extraction well system is implemented and the design well locations will need to be adjusted or additional wells installed if more fine-grained soils are encountered in greater proportions than coarse-grained soil at certain locations, because obviously the more fine-grained, you're going to need a different flow rate, a different pumping rate to accommodate what kind of water you're having moving toward the Rogue River. So obviously the model is only as good as the inputs, and it can be a helpful tool, but real world things can, what you encounter in the field can, vary from models. They're a good tool though. So just a reminder, this report is posted online, the whole report, at www.michigan.gov/Rockford Tannery. Also, if you can't access that for whatever reason, there are printed hard copies available for review at Plainfield Charter Township offices, the City of Rockford offices, municipal offices, and Algoma Township municipal offices. So the basic concept of this overall pump and treat system is install a groundwater extraction well network capable of capturing PFAS contaminated groundwater at the site before it enters the Rogue River. So based on all of that modeling that we just talked about, and the geostatistics, and their pumping tests, and review of the soil boring logs that they have, Wolverine came up with this proposal of a preliminary design. And we're going to look at the map on the next slide. Basically, it's 10 shallower extraction wells and 3 deeper extraction wells on the south side of Rum Creek, and 6 shallow extraction wells on the north side of Rum Creek. So here's sheet number 6 from the report. And you'll see these blue triangles here represent the shallower extraction wells, and those are targeting a specific groundwater elevation at the site, roughly the upper 15 feet, depending on where you're at, but just generally it's roughly the upper 15 feet for when something's called the shallow. So you have the 10 blue triangles representing those on the south side of Rum Creek, and then the 6 on the north side of Rum Creek. And then you also have these 3 green triangles, which represent the deeper extraction wells, again, because of the site conditions. And those, when we say deeper, usually, we're up to 45 feet, targeting specific groundwater elevations that are mentioned in this report based on the pump tests and observed lithology there. So for a groundwater extraction well system, the capture zones, basically of these individual wells, each well is going to have its own capture zones. You want to make sure that those overlap each other to prevent groundwater flow from escaping between the wells, right? And so in order to do that and monitor that, Wolverine is proposing this groundwater monitoring plan in section 11. So it proposes the use of 14 monitoring wells. These are not the extraction wells. These are 14 additional wells that they're proposing to be located between the extraction wells. It's going to require, basically for the life of the system operating, when the system is operating, you need to make sure it's performing, right? So it's going to be weekly measurements would have to be obtained from these monitoring points. We'll talk about, basically it's those transducers placed in an extraction well, in the actual extraction wells to monitor the elevations, and then monitoring the levels in those monitoring wells to see how those are interacting and moving. Basically, the goal of the weekly measurements is to make sure water levels are lower in the monitoring wells than staff gauges that are located in the river. There's 2 staff gauges that they're proposing to measure weekly. There's one north of Rum Creek and one south of Rum Creek. And again, they'll have to monitor the flow rates from the extraction wells that's sucking out the water. And obviously all of that will need to be reviewed by an engineering team to see if any tweaks or changes need to be made. There is kind of a delicate balance where you don't want any groundwater slipping through, right, that system. And then you also don't want to be pulling in water from the river as well. So it is going to take some tweaking and definitely some good monitoring to make sure that the system is performing the way it's supposed to. So here is those 14 wells, the gray circles that are Wolverine's proposing to put in between those extraction wells, basically to make sure there's no water that would be, you know, passing through that capture wall, if you will. So that's the proposed monitoring wells, those gray circles. This is sheet number 7 from the plan. So you're probably like, okay, that's great. They're intercepting this water, but where is it going? How does this look? So we'll go over that. So basically, you're going to have these monitoring wells. They're going to be under, you know, just installed at different depths, recovery wells installed at different depths. You're going to have piping below this ground surface that's going to connect these wells. You know, they're going to take the water that's being pumped out of the wells and pipe that up to a treatment building that's going to be built on the Tannery property. Right now, they're saying it's likely based on site conditions, geotechnical work northwest of the retail store. So the extraction wells are gonna, you know, where able, they're gonna try and make those flush mounts, so flush with the ground surface. So you don't, there are some wells that are called stick ups and you can see those at the property. But I talked, you know, with them, initial design was including flush mount wells for that. So flush with the surface, but so you're not gonna see really a bunch above surface, but a lot of this engineering and piping will be below surface. Obviously, there'll be a pipe that's going to have to cross over Rum Creek and be engineered that way. And then they're going to all connect into a treatment building. And what that's going to do is use granular activated carbon, or GAC, after iron removal, sediment filtration, and ultraviolet sanitation. It's so the water is going to be treated. It's going to go through the GAC vessels. And there's going to be the ability to add on ion exchange resin in addition to the GAC if needed, because there's going to be requirements that they're going to have to meet, obviously, of the treated water. It's going to have to be below our standards in order to meet different permit requirements. It actually needs to be non-detect for their current permit, last I knew, for the North Kent Sewer Authority. So basically, this water that's going to be going through there, this 1 gallon per minute at the most, depending based on the current model, right? I mean, things can change in the real world, but that water is going to be going through this treatment system, and then it's going to be a certain amount based on the permit that's North Kent Sewer Authority is giving, is going to be discharged to the North Kent Sewer Authority, so in the sanitary sewer. Certain volume of that's described, I believe, in Appendix F a little bit in more detail, some of the estimated volumes. And they're requiring non-detect because at their plant, right, North Kent Sewer Authority is getting, you know, sanitary sewer from all the users who are on it. So they want as little PFAS in their waste stream coming to them that they have to deal with as possible. So they're actually requiring 0 non-detect below detection limits of PFAS. And then to supplement that, because they can only give so much to NPDS or to NKSA, North Kent Sewer Authority, they're going to need to get a permit, NPDES permit through EGLE. Basically, it's a surface water discharge permit where they're going to need to, you know, obviously meet standards that are given in that permit to be able to discharge that to the Rogue River and have purpose, you know, a certain monitoring schedule and meet all the requirements of our NPDES permitting that's done through Water Resource Division. And then this is just a picture I found online just to kind of give you a scale, a showing, not saying these are the exact ones that are going to be here. It's just a larger granular activated carbon vessels that I snagged offline. just to kind of help folks visualize that. And so there's also a schedule included, Appendix E, that you can take a look at. Basically, what Wolverine's proposing is after approval of whatever plan, when we get to that point, it'll be 70 days to complete the final design and specs, 51 days to then bid out to contractors this construction installation work, 225 days for the actual construction work to be done. And then potentially they're including a lot of days here, 260 of 325 days for system startup, because they don't know how long the MPDS approval is going to take. I doubt it's going to take that long, but I think they're just trying to maybe be a little bit more conservative and estimating that, since they don't know. But obviously once it's fully started up, they may have to start up what they can and discharge to NKSA, right? Because they have that permit and that's ready to go. And then once they get the MPDS, be able to do the remaining volumes that needs to be discharged through that. But obviously when the system is started, that's when the performance monitoring, the weekly monitoring will then start. And so this is basically what this graph is showing, this chart is showing in Appendix E. So basically we'll be taking our public comments through May 22nd. So you can send those again to the same email address we've been using for all of Wolverine. We're not going to create a new one just for the Tannery. We're just going to keep using the House Street ones. That's why it says House Street. So it's EGLE-RRD-HouseStreet@michigan.gov. You can send your comments to that, or you can mail them to me. I'll give you the address to our office next. We're going to prepare a responsiveness summary document that's going to address and summarize all the public comments we received, which we then post online. So we're almost finished with our House Street one, right? Because we got comments on that. So we're still going through that for the previous public meeting we did a little over a month ago, but we're getting close, and we'll be doing the same thing for this. And then based on our technical review, our review in relation to how it's fitting in with the consent decree, based on the public comments we received, we then complete our review of the plan and provide feedback and comments back to Wolverine. So kind of this is just an overall reporting schedule, kind of a large picture. So we have this current response activity plan, right? Based on our review, we're in consideration of the comments, we have to either approve with conditions, or deny. And so there could be a little bit back and forth depending on how this goes. But upon final approval of a approvable final work plan, Wolverine will then commence the work and install the system according to the schedule that's in the final approved work plan. Then the consent decree requires, okay, within 2 years, you have the system on, you have it working, you're doing your monitoring. You need to, with no later than 2 years, show and provide a report that shows, hey, the interceptor system is effective, it's doing what it needs to do, it's preventing PFAS from entering surface water above water quality standards. However, if they've been running into some issues and the system needs some tweaks, they need to then propose modifications to the system to make sure it is meeting its goal of stopping the groundwater from entering into the Rogue River above surface water quality standards. Then there's also something called a completion report. That's more once the system is good, we know it's effective, it's been demonstrated effective, that's been done. This completion report's due 6 months after that is demonstrated, which we talked about above. This report also is going to include long-term operation and maintenance, continued groundwater monitoring long-term, and financial assurance long-term. And that's in section 712 of the consent decree. So with that, we're on my last slide. We do want to hear from you. So you submit your written comments again, through May 22nd, I'll keep saying that, to EGLE, EGLE-RRD-House Street at michigan.gov. So submit it by email, or if it's easier, submit it by mail to Karen Vorse at EGLE-RRD for Remediation Redevelopment Division. There's a number of divisions at our office, so just make sure you put RRD. And that's 350 Ottawa Avenue Northwest, Unit 10, Grand Rapids, Michigan, 49503. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to give me a call on my work cell phone, 616-439-8008, or you can email me at vorcek at michigan.gov. And if you need any assistance with providing your comments in writing or anything like that, please give me a call, shoot me an email, and I can help you with that as well. And again, just a note, since we have different plans, many plans associated with this site, just make sure in your comments you're referencing the Tannery Interceptor plan that you're commenting on. And with that, I will turn it over to Les to provide any more direction on the Q&A portion.
All right, thanks, Karen. Thank you for the great presentation. Just want to give a quick update on the housekeeping. So a couple of people have already submitted questions, but for the remainder of our guests, just want to remind everyone that in order to, if you have questions for Karen, just go ahead and type your questions in the Q&A box located in the bottom of the Zoom control panel. It looks like two little cartoon call outs or captions or caption bubbles. So go ahead and type your questions there. You may choose to raise your hand also. That's also located in the control panel. And for our guests, we have two guests that have joined us by phone only. And for our guests on the phone, you can select the pound and the 2 key on your phone to electronically raise your hand. And we'll be looking for your hands raised in that situation so you can ask a question of Karen. So with that, we do have questions that have come in, Karen, if you are ready. And I know Abby will be joining you as well. So let's just get to it.
Sure.
Okay, so our first question, I saw this question when it came in. So you had a diagram, probably around slide 7 or 8, with the vertical lines on it. And this question concerns, what does the pink waistline represent on the diagram?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that was the waist. There were scraps of leather and hides that were encountered at the tannery site when they were doing all of their borings for US EPA. And so some of that, and this is probably going to be a comment that EGLE's going to have, some of that has been removed. There was time critical removal activities that removed a lot of, especially on the north side of Rum Creek, those hides, former, that they made the leather things out of, animal hides and finished leather scraps, and different just urban fill material. That's what that waste material represents. So some of that actually has been removed, and those boring logs are going to need to be updated to show that. Not all of it was, but a certain amount to a certain depth was. So that's what the pink waste was referring to. That's a good question.
Thank you, Karen.
Mm-hmm.
Next question, and for the requesters here, thank you for the kind words to the team. First question is EGLE validating the actual inputs used by Wolverine World Wide to create their modeling for this project? Yeah,
so we have a subcontractor that we use to support us in our oversight of this, a consultant who has a whole groundwater modeling team who has done a full review of the model, and has quite a bit of comments and things where they did review the model in detail and are trying, have certain remaining questions that we'll need to get additional information on for the model. So my answer to that would be yes, they're they're doing a very in-depth, detailed review on the model itself.
Okay, and Karen, as a follow-up to that, the modeling will be validated against real-time conditions?
That's what we like to see. We need to see the model as it compares to what we get in the real world, right? And that's why this groundwater monitoring plan is really almost one of the most important parts of this, because models, you know, are a model. They're not always perfect. And depending on what inputs you can put in, you can make models say a lot of things, right? They can be useful tools, but you have to take it for what it is, a model. So that's why the actual field readings and real-time readings are really, really important, and what we're really going to be keeping an eye on as the system is up and running and stuff. The model just kind of helps with the preliminary design to see if you have the right pump size, the right this, the right that. But you know, the proof in the gravy is the actual real-time readings you get once it's installed. But in this report, you will see some of the pump test results, the observed readings versus the model readings. And that's kind of interesting to look at to see what those differences are.
All right, and thank you, Karen. One more question here. Regarding the weekly monitoring wells, this is for the lifetime, asking if this is for the lifetime of the facility. So how will this be enforced, the monitoring?
Well, that's where it's going to be, the full long-term monitoring is going to be kind of immortalized in the completion report that's going to be due to us, and that's going to have the long-term monitoring plan. And then also it has to provide a financial assurance mechanism associated with costs associated with running that for a certain amount of years and running the system. So all of that is kind of incorporated in that and required under the consent decree in that section. I think it's 7.12. Because yeah, obviously the system's going to have to run for a very long time, as long as PFAS is there and as long as it's entering the Rogue River above our standards. Right, Abby? Did you have anything to add?
No, I think it's just a very perceptive question in that, you know, we know this has got to be a long-term solution because PFAS is you know, going to be there for a very long time. And I think that the idea is to keep this stuff from getting into the river. But, you know, the financial assurance mechanism is based on a 25-year average cost rolling into perpetuity to make sure that there's money there to cover the cost of this system. So that's built in as part of the consent decree. And so we're going to, you know, do our best to make sure on the front end that the system is properly modeled, validated, sized, and that the performance objectives are met for this system to actually make sure that it's demonstrated that we do not have PFAS continuing to enter into the Rogue River.
Okay.
I'll just leave it like that.
Okay, thanks, Abby. I have one raised hand, so I'm going to jump over here and grab this one before I come back to the other questions. So for our guests with the raised hand, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak. Hopefully your mic is open, and if you have a question for our panel, feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, this is AJ Birkbeck. I just had two real quick questions. For the amount of treated extracted groundwater that's discharged to the Rogue River, is that going to be the same standard as is required by the North Kent Sewer Authority? In other words, non-detect, or could that potentially be at a higher level?
I think it's going to depend on Water Resource Division of what their permit requires are with all of our MPDS permits. Since it's there, I don't want to quote them to what their level is going to be, but we can ask them and get that info to you, AJ.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it just seems like unless you're going to have two extraction lines,
exactly,
you know, one
it's
that
all going to be
cleans it up
coming
all the
out
way and one that cleans it up to within standards. It just so I was curious on that. The other was your timeline, and I noticed there was a bunch of days on there. The last one was 325 days for system startup. Is that from inception or is it that's all those numbers there were cumulative and it's going to be more like 2 years? Because
my understanding, yeah, that's a good question, because it was kind of hard for me to interpret that myself, to be honest. And I'm probably going to follow up with Wolverine on that just so I don't misspeak. But my understanding was that was kind of like from the start of starting to put in the system and whatnot, because you have it installed. They're going to be working on the permits, obviously, while they're, starting the installation of it and all of that. So that's my understanding, is it was kind of like additive, because I think the total, I know it didn't exceed from on that Gantt chart that was included. I don't think it exceeded 17 months total.
Okay, yeah, that would
from
make
like
sense.
the start to the end.
Yeah, I just couldn't read that
I
super
know.
tiny writing, and everything that I had heard, up to this time is it would be about a year, maybe a little less. So,
Mhm.
I guess unless we hear from Wolverine to the contrary, we'll assume that it's really 325 days from approval
Mhm.
to get it up and running. Is that right?
Yeah, I'll get it. I'll double check with them too, so we can get that over to you guys in the CAG to verify that exact timeline too.
Super. That's all I had at this time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, Karen, I wanted to give you a chance to write that down. So
I got it.
Okay. All right. Next question. Question deals with some of the highest concentrations of PFAS located outside of the extraction well area along the Rogue River, excuse me. Why is there no compliance monitoring in this area? If the goal is to prevent PFAS from entering the Rogue River, why is Wolverine not required to monitor the river water for PFAS?
So I wouldn't say Wolverine's not required to. I would say in their monitoring plan, they're currently not proposing it. So I'm not saying that that wouldn't be something EGLE would obviously want to see, because on basically all of our sites across the state that involve remediation systems and pump and treat systems, there's usually some sort of actual analytical results associated with that to field verify that. But again, their pumping wells and their kind of extraction wells will be kind of going forward a little bit, if you will. Their capture zones, and on some of the figures, it's supposed to be engineered to be able to get the water that's kind of in front of them as well as behind them a certain amount, because again, we have to be careful with not sucking in water from the Rogue River. So there will be kind of a balance that has to be met there. But no, I'd say that's a great comment that you could provide us for sure.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Karen. Did you have something to add, Abby, to that?
No, I
Okay,
think
all right.
there's a lot of similar type questions here that we'll be getting into this a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I see that. I'm thinking the next question here might be along the same lines. This one also concerns how will they, being Wolverine, know that PFAS is being collected?
Right. So
go ahead.
Same,
Sorry, go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, same thing. They're going to be doing making sure the flow rates are appropriate, and they're capturing things with the wells and looking at the water levels against the staff gauges. But that's definitely a question that we have as well, and probably will include that as a comment to us, so we can include that in our public comment responsiveness summary document too.
And that's specifically a requirement of the consent decree, is that they demonstrate that the system they install is effective for keeping this stuff out of the river. So, some sort of monitoring of actual, groundwater collection and analysis for PFAS would have to be a part of that. There's just no other way to really demonstrate it. You can do mechanical demonstrations, but you're so close to the river there that you're going to have to actually show us that the capture system is working.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Thank you, Abby. Is the interceptor system proposed based on proven science, or is it just based on modeling?
I would say, these interceptor systems are used at different sites for different things. I mean, it is a well-known, treatment technology. It's just getting the system specifically designed for site-specific conditions and making sure that you have it engineered properly and all calibrated properly is where it's a little bit more difficult and takes, a little bit more time sometimes to get to that. You use the model to help you with the initial design, but obviously you have to tweak the model based on what you're seeing in the field and what your measurements and your performance monitoring is telling you. But no, this isn't like an unknown way to extract water. This is used at a number of sites for even different compounds, different types of sites.
But it is a lot easier if you're not working right next to a river.
Yeah, it makes it definitely, there's added difficulty with having to make sure you're not pulling in river water, being so close to the river.
Okay, all right, thank you, Karen and Abby. Okay, next set of questions. Looks like some of the monitoring wells were located where there is a new parking lot. Will the parking lot affect extraction, or will it have to be modified?
I'm not sure which parking lot they're talking about, the one to the south or like the shoe store parking lot to the north, maybe. But obviously I know it's all on Wolverine owned property. So they'll be able to, if, any access issues or safety hazard or tripping hazard or anything, that's going to obviously need to be addressed. But I don't think it's as far south as going into like the municipal parking area. If that was what their question is. They can
Okay.
email me too if they want to talk more about which parking lot too.
Okay, all right, thanks, Karen.
Mhm.
With regards to the interceptor, will other contaminants be intercepted as well, such as ammonia?
Yeah, that's the goal here is that, yes, it's not just going to be PFAS. So there's other obviously permitting requirements of sampling for other analytes that have to be within appropriate regulatory levels as well with their discharge permits. But then that's something also EPA is looking at this plan as well and having their START contractor kind of review that, because obviously EPA is concerned with the non-PFAS things as well to make sure, might as well make sure a final a long-term remedy like this can meet both programs objectives and contaminants that are being monitored for.
Okay, yeah, we had a similar question related to the ammonia, wanting to know if Wolverine would need to treat the water for ammonia under their NPDES permit.
Yeah, definitely. Anything that they have that's going in, they're going to need to show that it's being treated to the appropriate levels.
Okay. Next question. Looks like the Rum Creek shoreline is not covered by any interception wells. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, there is some of the Rum Creek to a certain point looks to be where it's kind of just open shoreline, but further, we're going to have to be looking at that closer too, because further down on Rum Creek, it's actually cement walls along Rum Creek, along kind of the southern part of the property. But that is something, since Rum Creek theoretically in the unpaved parts, especially, is also considered a ganging stream. So we'll have to obviously make sure that through the performance monitoring that's done, that there isn't PFAS that's getting into Rum Creek that's just going to then go into the Rogue River, right? And kind of make the whole purpose of that not, make it doesn't really meet the purpose if you're still allowing PFAS into Rum Creek. But it seems like some of their wells kind of did go to the south a little bit to try to do that. But again, we're having our modeling folks take a closer look at that and make sure we have enough monitoring points in the real world to verify that that isn't happening.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Karen. There's a question about the EPA study and sampling results. Is this information available, and where can it be located?
Yeah, so that report and a bunch of other reports are on the Tannery website. There's a link at the bottom where that www.michigan.gov//Rockford Tannery. At the bottom of the page, there's like a link that says like Wolverine documents that you can go to, and it will pull up all the reports. It is a lot to go through. I know exactly where it is on that long list because it's dated. I think it was dated in kind of early to mid 2019. So if you look for the implementation plan for the Tannery site, the first big volume is posted there on that documents list. But if you have a hard time navigating and finding that, shoot me an email, vorsk@michigan.gov, and I can like show you exactly on that list where it's at, because it's getting to be a very long list of documents now.
Okay. There's a follow-up question a little bit down, Dave, because Dave's following along with me. The follow-up question pertains to how long it takes for sampling data to show up when it's posted.
Sampling
Or
data.
I think in this, I don't know if this question is specifically to the EPA part of it, or if it's for the
It's
for
the PFAS monitoring.
But the data is not posted in real time for this sampling. So Karen's getting quarterly and semi-annual monitoring from Wolverine on as the schedule allows for the consent decree.
Yeah, for
But
this
it's all
though, it
coming
would,
in different pieces.
yeah, for this, since, you know, we don't really, the plan doesn't really say that right now, I can't comment on that, but like, obviously they're going to need to demonstrate that it's working. I guess if their concern is the sampling is going to take too long, you know, after the system's installed or what, depends on kind of what part we're talking about. There's different requirements of submitting the info. We get monthly data dumps from Wolverine of all of their monthly PFAS data that our subcontractor, you know, we review and look at. And they are required to submit quarterly summary reports and then these other reports. So if there's a specific type of data you're concerned about or interested in, I guess let me know and we can kind of go over that.
But to her answer, Karen, I think that the question is we get the data internally, but that data is not posted externally until it comes through Wolverine's actual reports in hard copy format that we post on the website.
Right.
We're not posting in that data that we're getting.
No, because there really wouldn't be a way because it's like in a huge database. So that's difficult for us. It is, you know, Freedom of Information Act, it's all public data. It's just hard for us to, right now, we don't have a way of making it all publicly available. I think in the future, that's the goal that EGLE has is making it so all of our data and records are just public facing because it would just be a lot easier.
But right now you'd probably need about 3 terabytes in order to get it all.
It might crash the whole website maybe.
All right. Okay, thank you. Next question is, how will the Tannery Interceptor plan affect the current recro waste streams located within the demolition area of the Wolverine Tannery?
I mean, they're not proposing, at least for EGLE, we're focused on the PFAS. So there could be additional work being done with EPA and RCRA or CERCLA hazardous substances. But the goal of this interceptor system is to prevent anything that's in the groundwater stream. You know, it's going to fortunately do double duty. PFAS is just so prevalent and so mobile, and it's located. So it's really the main driver for the issue of what's getting into the water here. That it is, you know, going to be collecting the groundwater that's impacted with whatever else is coming across. But this isn't like a waste removal or anything like that. This is specifically for groundwater and how it's making sure it's not getting into the Rogue River.
Yeah, I wonder, Karen, if this attendee was asking about whether or not that would change the waste classification of the water because it was going through the RCRA waste. But EPA did do a time critical action here and had Wolverine remove some of the hot spots so that they didn't have those exceedances of so there was a couple spots for metals, chromium. I'm trying to think of what else they removed, but there was
Yeah. And again, they're
removed.
going to have to be doing the sampling for whatever water they are sucking up, you know, just to put it bluntly, to make sure that they're meeting all the applicable requirements, obviously, and treating it down to levels that are below, you know, below the levels that are required.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Abby. Our next guest has a question and a raised hand. So I'm going to unmute the mic here and we'll tackle these together.
Sounds good.
Hi, Karen. This is Brenda Harris calling. And
Hi.
I first I want to just thank you guys for everything that you're doing. You're just you're heaven sent. So we do appreciate you very much. But I wanted to ask you a question about the extraction filtration system or facility that would be built on the property. Can you estimate how large that facility is going to be? Is it one building or multiple buildings? Just to kind of get an idea of what that would look like from a ground level.
Yeah, that's a good question. That information was not, I did not see that information included in the plan. So I'd say that is a good comment and that is something we would ask to, you know, where we want to see kind of the schematics of, you know, the footprint of that building. I think the original proposed building was first just to the west of the shoe store building, and that's in appendix, I think it is F. And it was, you know, definitely much smaller than the shoe depot building itself. It was kind of on the western side of that, if I'm remembering it. But I think once they did their geotechnical borings and things, and the addition of the additional extraction wells on the north, they realized, oh, it's not going to work to have it there. We're going to need to move it further to the north. But I can definitely ask, I think Wolverine's online here too, and GZA for additional details on that, because I think that is important information for the public, especially to know, hey, what's this going to look like exactly? But you know, I'm really bad at estimating square footages, but it's definitely a lot smaller than the shoe depot building. You know, I would picture it as kind of like a garage building.
Okay.
Wouldn't you, Abby? Like generally,
it really depends on the treatment technology that they end up choosing. If they decide that they, you know, if they run it through the GAC and resin, you know, it really depends on how many canisters they need in order in the sizing to keep up with the flow rate, because you know, there's a certain amount of contact time that the water needs to sit in contact with either the GAC or the resin for it to be effective and meet those low discharge rates. So it's all a matter of engineering, and sometimes they can be really big systems and sometimes they're not. But I think for the flow that they were looking at, I'm guessing it's going to be a little bit larger of a system, but I can't even begin to guess how big of a building they would need. So
I have putting that on the list to ask.
Excellent.
But yeah.
Thank you both very much.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question.
Okay. We presently don't have any new questions, but I just want to, just a reminder to our guests, please feel free to send any questions you have to the Q&A. And for our guests who are listening by phone only, you may ask a question by selecting the pound and the 2 key on your phone to reach out to our panel tonight. While we're waiting for if there are any other questions, I just want to let everyone know that as a reminder that the webinar is recorded and that we will send a message out in a day or two letting you know that the recording is available. The recording will appear first in EGLE's YouTube channel. So feel free to stop by there to look for the webinar in a day or so. You will also find webinar recordings for other MPART meetings that have been held throughout the state. So feel free to take a look at those. Also, the webinar link, the recording link will be added to the Wolverine site as well on MPART's webpage, on the House Street website. So,
Yep, House Street and Tannery website, probably both of them.
okay. So that's what I have for housekeeping and fine tuning points at this point. So.
Perfect. And if anyone thinks of any questions or after they dive into it more, obviously we still have a few more weeks left on the comment period. Feel free to give me a call, email me, and if I can't answer them, then we'll track down who can.
I think, Karen, I don't know if there's probably going to be some conversation about this plan again at the Citizens Advisory or
yes,
advisory group. Which
May 20th, I think, is their next meeting, the Wolverine Community Advisory Group. So we could do a plug for them. Go on Wolverine CAG's website. Just Google Wolverine CAG for Wolverine CAG. And they're doing their own independent review of this. And I know their next meeting is the third Thursday of each month. So I think that lands on May 20th. At 6 p.m.
So, all right, there are no other questions and no hands raised. And I think everybody wants to get out and see the sun before it goes down.
All right, very good. Again, thank you on behalf of the team here for joining us. I know that this was, but thank you for spending the time with us, and we hope that you do have an enjoyable rest of the evening. Karen's contact information is on the screen if you want to reach out and to ask additional questions after tonight's conversation. And with that, that will conclude tonight's webinar, and have a wonderful evening.
Bye.